In the brittle quiet of February 2004, the campus of the University of Massachusetts Amherst lay subdued under a thick, unyielding sheet of snow. The wind sliced through leafless trees, hissing against brick dormitories, whispering secrets that no one would ever be able to repeat. It was exam season, cold, tense, and unknowingly tragic. Somewhere amid the bustle of assignments and deadlines, 21-year-old Maura Murray was coming undone. To outsiders, Maura was the last person you'd expect to simply vanish. Her life on paper read like a success story. She had been a cadet at West Point, a standout runner on the track team, and was now studying nursing at UMass. Her dark brown hair framed a quiet smile, and her disciplined nature earned her the admiration of coaches and professors alike. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Subtle, fractured, hidden. On the night of Thursday, February 5th, something strange happened. Maura was working her usual shift at the campus security desk in Melville Hall. Around 10:30 p.m., she received a phone call. No one knows exactly what was said on the other end, only that after answering, Maura fell apart. She began crying uncontrollably, nearly hysterical. A supervisor who found her described her as completely zoned out, as if she wasn't even present in her own body. When asked what was wrong, she could only whisper one haunting phrase, "My sister." But later, her sister Kathleen would clarify, there was no emergency, no crisis, no death, just an emotionally raw conversation about addiction and rehab. A family matter, nothing explosive, but something about it broke Maura's composure. Whatever had triggered that reaction would never be fully understood. That night marked the beginning of her unraveling, and the countdown had begun. The next day, Maura's father, Fred Murray, came into town. They spent Saturday car shopping and had dinner together. Later that evening, Maura borrowed his Toyota Corolla to attend a party on campus. Around 2:30 a.m., in the early morning hours of Sunday, February 8th, she crashed the car on Route 9. There were no injuries, just damage to the vehicle. Police recorded the incident, and Fred filed an insurance claim. They didn't talk much about it again, but it was just one more odd detail in a series of events that now feel like flashing warning signs. By Monday morning, Maura's actions took a turn no one expected. She began crafting a lie. She emailed her professors claiming there had been a death in the family and that she would be absent from class for a few days. But there had been no death. It was a complete fabrication. She then called the owner of a condominium in Bartlett, New Hampshire, a place she had visited before with her family, and inquired about renting it. She seemed polite, quiet, and focused. Then, she took out nearly all the money in her bank account, just $280, and stopped by an ATM. Surveillance footage shows her alone, calm, no signs of distress. Next, she visited a liquor store and purchased alcohol. Bailey's, Kahlua, vodka, and boxed wine. Some would later speculate she was planning to drink heavily. Others wondered if the alcohol was for someone else. From there, Maura returned to her dorm, cleared out some belongings, including textbooks and toiletries, and even packed her favorite stuffed animal. She printed MapQuest directions to multiple locations in Vermont and New Hampshire, including Burlington and Franconia Notch. She left a cryptic email for her boyfriend, Billy Roche, who was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. "I love you more than anyone. I don't feel like talking to anyone. I promised to call you today, though." She didn't call. By 3:30 p.m., she was on the road, driving her black 1996 Saturn sedan through the icy stretches of rural New Hampshire, heading north on Route 112, alone, purposeful, and silent. No one knows exactly where she was going. Her family would later insist she was simply taking a break, going to clear her head. But why all the secrecy? Why the deception? And why did she never tell a single soul where she was headed? Around 7:27 p.m., everything stopped. Residents along Wild Ammonoosuc Road in Woodsville, New Hampshire, heard a loud crash. Maura's car had skidded off the road into a snowbank, just east of the sharp curve near the weathered barn. The front end was damaged. The windshield cracked. The driver's side airbag had deployed. A nearby resident, Butch Atwood, a school bus driver, stopped to check on the driver, a young woman, alone. She appeared shaken but uninjured. Butch offered to call for help. She declined. She insisted she had already phoned AAA. Butch knew there was no cell service in that area. It was a lie, and a strange one. Trusting her word, he drove home and called the Haverhill police around 7:43 p.m. When officers arrived less than 10 minutes later, Maura was gone. No footprints were leading away from the scene. No blood. No signs of a struggle. Her car was locked. The driver's license, AAA card, and the alcohol she bought were found inside. Her cell phone and debit card, however, were never recovered. Just nothing. A vanished girl and a cold wind howling through the pines. In the years that followed, theories would flood every corner of the internet. Some said she was abducted. Others believed she ran away, started a new life. Some claimed she died in the woods that night, just beyond the reach of the searchlights. Her father never believed that. Neither did her sister Julie. The idea that Maura had simply wandered off and succumbed to the elements felt hollow. Untrue. Forced. This was not a typical missing persons case. There was no warning, no final goodbye, only a carefully constructed exit and a void that has never been filled. As investigators combed the area for weeks, then months, it became clear this wasn't just a disappearance. It was a puzzle, one built from secrets, fear, and the strange silence that follows a scream that no one hears. And it was only the beginning. Snow was falling harder now. Thick flakes drifted down like ash from some unseen fire, softening the landscape but also swallowing it. Light from the police cruisers flickered against bare branches and deep shadows as officers examined the scene of Maura Murray's abandoned car. It was quiet, too quiet for a fresh crash. No engine noise, no visible injuries, no driver, and no Maura. By 7:46 p.m. on Monday, February 9, 2004, by the time Officer Cecil Smith arrived, the scene was eerie in its stillness, as if the crash had happened hours ago. The airbags were deployed. A box of wine had burst open. The driver was gone. Maura had slipped through time, unnoticed. Within minutes, police began standard procedures. They called in a tow truck, logged the scene, took photographs. But from the very beginning, something felt off. The entire event, the lie to the bus driver, the lack of footprints in fresh snow, the alcohol, the empty road, all of it painted a portrait more abstract than literal. What was she doing here? Where had she gone? It wasn't until the following morning that authorities realized they weren't just dealing with a single-car accident. They were dealing with a missing person. But even that label felt insufficient. Maura hadn't been reported missing that night. Not by friends, not by family, not even by her college. In fact, 24 hours passed before her disappearance became anything more than an odd footnote in a small-town police log. Her father, Fred, had been trying to reach her since Monday night, unaware she'd left Amherst. On Tuesday, when she failed to answer his calls again, concern turned to panic. He contacted the UMass campus police and was soon informed that his daughter had emailed her professors about a family emergency, one that never happened. It was the first lie, and it would not be the last. That same day, police officially listed her as missing. Fred drove to New Hampshire immediately, arriving at the crash site to find the Saturn already impounded. Snow had buried the shoulders of Route 112. The only footprints visible now were from investigators and wild animals. If Maura had walked off into the woods that night, the snow had long since erased any trace. But here's where the story twists even tighter. A witness who lived in a house overlooking the crash site claimed she saw movement around the car shortly after it happened. Through her window, she spotted someone, possibly Maura, outside the vehicle. Minutes later, she turned away for a moment. When she looked again, the figure was gone. Some residents would later report seeing a dark-colored pickup truck in the area that night, a vehicle that was never identified. Others spoke of an older man who may have been seen with Maura. None of it was confirmed. None of it made sense. Still, questions piled up. If Maura had planned to disappear, why go here? Why not run somewhere with fewer eyes, less snow, more escape routes? She had taken no winter gear, no clear survival supplies. Her cell phone had been turned off. Her bank account was untouched. Her credit cards would never be used again. And there was no suicide note. No sign of emotional crisis, at least not on paper. But in the days following her disappearance, the contradictions in her life began to surface. Her boyfriend, Billy Roche, described her as smart and driven, but there had been problems. Rumors swirled of infidelity. Emails suggested she might have felt trapped. One of her final phone calls had been to a man who worked at a rental condo agency in Bartlett, New Hampshire, a place her family vacationed before. She had maps printed, directions ready. Her car is loaded. This wasn't an impulsive drive. This was planned, but no one knew why. The next few days saw an eruption of panic. Search teams flooded the area, aided by scent-tracking dogs, helicopters, and volunteers combing the woods on foot. Cadaver dogs were brought in. They traced Maura's scent from the crash site for approximately 100 yards. Then, nothing. It stopped, abruptly, as if she had been picked up by a vehicle. To the Murray family, the implication was horrifying. Maura had been abducted. But police weren't convinced. There was no evidence of foul play, no blood, no items suggesting a struggle. It was entirely possible they believed that Maura had simply walked away, voluntarily. That theory would form the basis of their official stance for years to come. A theory that enraged her family. Fred Murray especially refused to believe it. He began conducting his own parallel investigation. He printed flyers, held press conferences, walked the woods alone. His daughter hadn't run away, he insisted. Something had happened to her, and someone knew more than they were saying. But suspicion started to swirl around Fred himself, too. He became a fixture in the case, vocal, relentless, sometimes combative with law enforcement. The media began to question his involvement. Online forums speculated about his behavior. Innocent or not, Fred had become part of the mystery. And that, perhaps, was the most dangerous element of all. No one could be trusted. Even Maura's friends grew more silent. Her college withheld information. The investigation stalled. A week passed, then 2, then a month. Still no answers. Still no Maura. And slowly, inevitably, the case began to cool. By spring, the snow had melted. The search efforts had shrunk. The national attention faded, replaced by newer stories, newer tragedies. But the void where Maura once lived remained. Her family refused to let the case die. And neither would the internet. By 2005, Maura's disappearance had become more than a case. It was an internet phenomenon. 1,000 strangers dissected her last days like scripture. Snowpack maps, satellite timelines, even the stains on her back seat. She wasn't missing anymore. She was mythologized. Some believed she'd run. Others were sure she'd been taken by a stranger, maybe someone she met online, maybe someone darker. Some pointed to Israel Keys, a predator who thrived in silence. But every theory led to the same place, nowhere. The theories were endless, but no body was ever found. No trace, just silence stretching on for decades. In the deep woods of New Hampshire, where Route 112 still winds through the cold and the trees, there's no marker to show where Maura disappeared. No memorial, just a curve in the road and a hollow space in time. A girl drove into the night, and then she was gone. By the summer of 2004, the snow was gone. The crash site along Route 112 had become just another patch of earth again. The scars from that night softened by time and weather. But for those who remembered, the air still felt wrong there, like something unfinished, unspoken. And everywhere Maura's name was spoken, it carried a question mark no one could remove. The woods hadn't given her back. The roads hadn't led anywhere new. There were no surveillance videos, no phone pings, no credit card swipes. In a digital age that left fingerprints on everything, Maura Murray had become a ghost. That kind of silence isn't natural, and people couldn't accept it. What began as a small-town mystery started to spread, like smoke through online forums, chat boards, and early blogs. The case tapped into something primal. A beautiful young woman vanishing without a trace. Felt like a glitch in reality. And when logic fails, obsession begins. By 2005, Maura's disappearance had sparked a digital wildfire. Hundreds of armchair investigators, some former law enforcement, many not, took it upon themselves to solve the mystery. They dissected timelines, compared snowpack maps to satellite photos, pulled weather data, zoomed in on photos of the crash, counted empty bottles, measured Maura's walking speed, charted her probable radius. They weren't just curious, they were possessed. The online community took on a life of its own. Anonymous users began tracking down Maura's high school friends, contacting relatives, publishing deep dives on Fred Murray's interviews. Every glance, every quote, every gap in memory became a clue. People began crafting psychological profiles of her, painting her as either a runaway, a troubled genius, or a doomed victim. None of them ever knew her. Some even accused her boyfriend, Billy Roche, of being involved. They pointed to cryptic voicemails, an old military ID, a text message he sent her dorm mate days after her disappearance. All circumstantial, all deeply unsettling. But the worst of it, the part no one could undo, was that Maura was no longer a person. She was a puzzle, and everyone wanted a piece. In 2006, 2 years after she vanished, a disturbing new tip reignited interest in the case and stoked a fresh fire under the Murray family's grief. A man in New Hampshire contacted a local volunteer search team with a bizarre story. He claimed that a cadaver dog had hit on the scent of human remains in a house's basement not far from the crash site. The dog's handler corroborated it, but police declined to issue a warrant. There wasn't enough probable cause. The house in question had once belonged to someone with a criminal record. The family said the basement had been poured with new concrete shortly after Maura vanished. It was the kind of thing that sent message boards into full meltdown, the idea that Maura had been murdered and entombed in plain sight. Fred Murray demanded that the house be searched. He stood in front of cameras, begging, pleading, fighting with local law enforcement. But the walls didn't open, and the floor didn't speak. It wouldn't be until 2019, 15 years later, that state police would finally use ground-penetrating radar on that basement. They found nothing, just another empty promise in a case built on false starts. As years passed, the people who'd once known Maura aged, moved, remarried, and faded into ordinary life. Her father never did. Fred kept pressing. He filed lawsuits. He chased down sightings. He believed his daughter had been taken and possibly trafficked, and that someone somewhere still knew what happened. Every time a body turned up in the woods of New England, every Jane Doe found in remote places, her name would surface again. But it was never Maura. And yet, the theories only grew louder. One of the most persistent involved Israel Keyes, a methodical serial killer who later admitted to burying kill kits across the United States. Keyes operated on highways. He didn't kill close to home. He traveled far, struck quickly, and left no evidence. When he was arrested in 2012, he was tied to at least 11 murders. But many believe there were more. At the time of Maura's disappearance, Keyes was living in Tupper Lake, New York, about 200 miles from Haverhill, where Maura disappeared. That alone was enough to ignite speculation. He matched the profile. He was known to stalk victims beforehand. He liked isolated places, but the FBI never connected him to Maura's case. And now they never will. Keyes died by suicide in his jail cell, leaving behind only a series of blood-drawn skulls on his cell wall and a map of unspoken horrors. In 2017, the Oxygen Network released a 6-part documentary titled The Disappearance of Maura Murray, which brought renewed national attention to the case. Maura's sister Julie participated. So did Fred. Viewers were reintroduced to the haunting mystery, this time with reenactments, expert panels, and drone footage of those cold New Hampshire woods. For a new generation, Maura wasn't just a missing person. She was an unsolved legend. But to her family, the show only reopened wounds. Julie, herself a former military cadet, often spoke publicly about the toll it took. How Maura had been failed by institutions, by law enforcement, by the people who turned her life into a hobby. Julie didn't just want answers. She wanted peace. But the internet does not do peace. It feeds on tragedy, and it never lets go. In 2021, after nearly 2 decades of silence, authorities returned to the area near the crash site and conducted a renewed ground search in the woods around Loon Mountain. Hope swelled. Articles speculated. Drones buzzed overhead. Nothing was found. And that's the part that haunts people most. The absence. The vacuum. The idea that someone can just vanish. And maybe the most chilling part of Maura Murray's story isn't what we know. It's what we don't. Not the crash. Not the footprints in the snow. Not the unreturned calls or the unsearched basements. Not the silence of those woods. Not the long nights. Her father still waits by a phone that hasn't rung in 20 years. It's the fact that someone out there might still know something, and they never said a word. Maura wasn't a myth. She was a real person. A daughter, a sister, a student, a woman just trying to outrun something or maybe run towards something else. And then she was gone, and we've been searching ever since. This is Trace of Evil. We follow the shadows that never made it home, and ask the questions that were buried with the silence. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and don't look away.